Hey yo wah wah dooba dooba da da. Hey yo wah wah dooba dooba da wah. Hey yo doo wah dooba dooba da wah. Hey yo doo wah dooba dooba da wah. Hey yo ba wah dooba 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 dooba. Hey yo da ba doo doo da ba. Hey yo da ba da ba.
What is wrong? You are master of all you survey.
Yes, and so I was the day before, and the day before that. He's right. I crave adventure. I crave destruction. I crave Superman. Ba, 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 Superman.
That's right. After the first Superman movie, we are craving more Superman. So, we are here to discuss whether or not Superman 2 delivers on that promise.
Welcome to the Countdown Show. Technically, Countdown to 9. Yes, we've been there before. Since there are so many Superman movies, that's where we're at. But this is where we get you ready for the biggest blockbusters, and we're happy you're here. I'm Paul Preston of the Movie Guys.
I'm Justin Bowler of The World.
And I'm Sean Blodgett of Creative Motion Entertainment, and we are here to talk about Superman 2.
But before we go too far, we have to get clear about how we're going to set this up, because Sean and I watched the Donner cut of this film, and it's an entirely different movie.
It's an entirely different kind of flying. Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
All right, that's enough of that. But seriously, how are we going to set this up?
Well, okay, in both movies, Superman faces off against Zod, Ursula, and Non.
Oh, the delicious Indian bread?
No, the person. The Kryptonian... Never mind. Okay, so he fights them both, and he fights them in both movies.
That's right. And in both movies, Lois Lane is trying to trick Clark into revealing that he is Superman.
That's right. And in both movies, he loses his power, discovers that Zod has come to take over the Earth, gets his powers back, and kills the bad guys.
That's right. Only how we get there is very different, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, you know, you tuned in on a day where we're going to cover a movie. We're covering two movies.
Boom!
They're the same movie.
It's Superman 2
So
movies.
we should waste no time. Let's launch right into it.
All right. Superman 2, released June 19th, 1981. The budget at the time was $54 million.
What was the budget?
The budget, which is when you mix brunch and a budget.
I
It's
really
delicious.
do. I love Brudget. Brudget's one of my favorite.
The budget was $54 million, which is approximately $200 million.
I'd like to have Brudget with Bridget.
I dated a girl named Bridget. Yeah, she was a great...
Really? She was great. It's all great to me.
Girlfriend.
Did she have a great budget?
This is going to be a 6-hour show.
The movie is 2 hours and 7 minutes. The theatrical. God, I'm having trouble today.
Well, you know what it is? It's because we're here early. You and I stayed up until, 1 o'clock
Yes.
Watching the movie. And we have some sound bites from that we're going to play back for Paul's benefit, because unfortunately Paul couldn't be here.
Right.
But we're going to play those back because we did a little sound thing before the movie and then one after.
But I did watch the Donner cut.
No, you did watch the
I got
Donner.
no credit at the top of the thing.
I'm
It's
sorry. Okay, yes. To be clear, Paul also consumed the
Just
Donner
at home
cut
alone.
as well,
In the
all by
dark.
himself in the
Crying.
dark. But to your credit, you also blazed through the Lester cut. I guess we'll call that one.
Sure, the theatrical cut.
Yeah. So obviously we're going to talk about both of them. Sorry, Justin, go on.
Where was I?
I don't know.
Budget, something budget.
Something about budgets. 2 hours, 7 minutes long, in release for 196 days. Directed by Richard Lester. Why
Asterisk.
Lester? Yeah, we will get back to that in a minute. Opened to $14 million. Worldwide gross for this was $216 million, which is not as much as Superman, by the way. Worldwide gross, $216 million, not as much as Superman. Ranked 197th in all-time rankings. Obviously, highest grossing of 1981. Just as a fun little fact, the highest grossing for 1980 was finishing up shooting right next door. Any guesses as to what that movie was?
Oh, The Empire Strikes Back.
Empire Strikes Back was filming right next to. Imagine being able to walk between those two sets.
Here's what's fun. You're walking and you're like, oh, hey, there's Yoda and there's Luke Skywalker in his Best Bennett gear, right? And you're like, that's so cool. And then you walk outside and you're like, hey, there's a guy in a cape with an S on. Like, how cool is that? That's awesome.
That'd be pretty awesome. In fact, there was someone on crew who was actually over visiting the Empire Strikes Back set, hurt himself and was unable to finish working at Superman and had to be replaced for the rest of the film. So
But now lives a great life off of the insurance he made from George Lucas. Thank you very much. No, I'm joking.
it's dangerous to be on a Star Wars set. Ask Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay, 1981 highest grossing film was obviously Superman 2. I've got the top 10 here. Let's see who can name more top 10 movies for 1981. Paul, I'm sure knows more of these than Sean. So Sean, you get first choice. Try and name something.
God. 1981.
Okay.
I got nothing. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
I'm proud
you
of
jump
my
in.
little movie that could, of
Yeah.
course, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Not only is in that top 10, but got beaten by Superman 2. And then these were the days when a movie stuck around so long, Raiders came back to the top spot 3 or 4 weeks into Superman 2's run because it's just so great. But so Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of them.
By the way-
Office Mojo does not list Raiders for 1981 in the top 10.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I believe untrue. Was 9 to 5 better than higher?
We can look it up right now.
I'm going to look it up. Hold on. Working 9 to 5. Yeah, release date June 12th, 1981.
That's Superman 2. You're talking about?
Nope.
The Raiders.
Raiders.
Domestic box office 1981. Raiders is not listed. Raiders is listed at 14th. When was it released?
Wow.
June
81?
12th.
I'll be damned.
That's interesting. Nope, didn't make the top 10. Not according to Box Office Mojo.
All right, so
Well,
let's hear the rest of these then, because I'm now since Raiders isn't there. Well, Paul, do you have other guesses then?
Well, movies like Chariots of Fire don't chart, so
No.
probably not have won Best Picture that year.
It's a really interesting list. For now, we're talking domestic is what I'm looking at.
Crawl. That was 83, I think. But
Yeah.
anyway.
No. I will also say that both of you have seen all of these movies.
Oh,
So they're incredibly popular.
okay.
The Thing is 82. I don't know.
There was a James Bond movie, 1981. Any guesses?
A View to a Kill.
No,
That's
that was like
85.
84.
84.
For Your Eyes Only?
For
Octopussy.
Your Eyes Only. Number 4 for Your Eyes Only. Point to Paul. Couple of historical. Well, a historical and a semi-historical. Which is a giant.
1941. No.
In that vein, but that wasn't 1981.
A Passage to India. No, that didn't chart.
No idea.
History of the World is where I was going.
Oh.
Number 7. Number 9, kids movie. And it was a follow-up to a huge
Great
kids
Muppet
movie.
Muppets Take Manhattan.
The great-
Manhattan.
Great Muppet Caper. That was number
Great
9.
Muppet Caper.
Let's go. Oh, okay.
I don't think I have seen that movie actually. Yeah.
Hal Linden? No. Who was the director?
Barney Miller?
Hal
Ashby?
Barney Miller was the director.
Nope.
Yeah.
Who was the director?
Of
You'll know this. I'll give you it. Burt Reynolds.
Hal Needham.
Oh, was Smokey and the Bandit.
Nope.
2.
Nope.
Oh, Cannonball Run.
Cannonball Run was number 3.
One of my faves. One of my faves when I was a kid. Dom DeLuise killing it.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in the takeout and the takeouts in the maybe in the takeouts too. No,
the movie is so wrong.
in the outtakes. I mean, Dom DeLuise. Come on, man.
Number 2 behind Superman 2. Any guesses? It's a comedy. Both of you have seen this several times. Paul, you and I could quote this endlessly.
Not Princess Bride.
No.
That was way later.
6 years
No idea.
It's like going into Wisconsin.
Oh,
I met her on a Monday and my heart stood still.
Stripes.
That's
Stripes.
right.
We literally peaked 'cause we were- Stripes, just Stripes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Number 1, Superman 2, Stripes. Then Cannonball Run, For Your Eyes Only, The Four Seasons, Excalibur, History of the World Part 1, Bustin' Loose. Nobody mentioned Bustin' Loose. The Great Muppet Caper, and Endless Love.
I almost said Stir Crazy, but we've been off. Raiders doesn't make the top 10.
No. I think it's because...
That is shocking.
Well, it stayed in theaters for... how long? Much longer, I'm sure. It was number 14, behind Body Heat, Halloween 2, and An American Werewolf in London.
That is bizarre as hell.
Listen, Body Heat probably did really well. I mean, that's a sexy film.
Let me
mean,
check
tell
1980 and see where Raiders was. Let's see if it
Unreleased. That's where that was.
Whoops, 1982.
I was going to say,
In post.
pretty sure that it didn't exist.
Jeez, I am all over. Yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark, number 2 for 1982.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Huh.
Wow.
So, Had a much longer run.
It is interesting in terms of the runs, like
What? It made most of its money after it had been opened for 6 months. I find this whole thing bizarre.
Well, but you know what? That makes sense for that time. I mean, I think about when I was a kid, I went and saw The Empire Strikes Back in the movie theater for, I don't know how long it stayed, but it had to have been 8 months, maybe a year in the theater. Like, I remember seeing it way past its initial. I think I went and saw it several times. So, I mean, it makes sense that, during that time. And let's not forget that these movies, it wasn't like they went to beta or VHS right out of the gate, right? It's like that. I remember as a kid, that stuff taking like at least a year or two before anything went to video.
According to Box Office Mojo, it made $21 million in 81. In 82, it made $190 million.
Wow.
You know what beat it out in 82?
Well, on Golden Pond, probably.
Probably.
Right?
I mean, come on. That's right.
82.
You got this.
Not Blade Runner.
No.
And not E.T. yet.
Yes, it was.
It was E.T.?
It was E.T. E.T.
Oh,
314.
Yeah,
I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark made $190 million, and it was destroyed by another movie that ended up two Steven Spielbergs. You know, come on,
And
by
another movie where
million?
the score is another character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes for Superman 2, 83%.
Huh.
Superman 1 on Rotten Tomatoes. Do we think it's higher or lower?
Oh, I think it's probably lower because younger people who are on Rotten Tomatoes and doing all that stuff probably scored it lower because it doesn't move fast.
Oh, that's interesting because you think that audience specifically doesn't appreciate it.
Yeah.
Oh, like current reviews.
Yeah. I mean, because are people our age going on Rotten Tomatoes actively and putting numbers for things? Probably not.
So you're going to say lower. Paul, you agree?
Sure.
Both of you are wrong. 93% Superman.
I'm really relieved to hear that. I'm glad I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Learn me to go with Sean.
I got other things to offer.
Superman 1, we talked about already the awards that it won. Superman 2 did not win as many awards.
So interesting.
Not nominated for a single Oscar, not nominated for a single Golden Globe. The only awards that it won of note, 1982 Best Science Fiction Film of the Saturn Awards, and Best Actor at the Saturn Awards went to Christopher Reeve.
Thank God somebody gave him an award.
Right.
Her performance is magical in all the movies. Well, in the first two.
Right.
We'll see what happens coming
as I said
in 3
before,
and 4.
He got the BAFTA for Superman for Best Lead.
And that Best Comedy thing.
Good.
That was
Right,
nice.
and they got the DJ Best Comedy.
You got that going for you.
Which is
nice.
hilarious because this movie the theatrical cut of this movie is far funnier and slapsticky than anything in that first one.
Which, by the way, in some of my research, I didn't know that Richard Lester had done, like, I think you mentioned this last time, Paul, like Hard Day's Night or whatever, these Beatles movies and things. And so he was known for that slapsticky kind of stuff. And he really doubled down on it. I watched a little comparative of Superman 2 Lester versus Donner cuts.
Right.
There's not a lot of great ones out there that really compare them. Usually they pick like one scene and they compare that thing. But it is interesting to see the amount of slapstick that is literally in the Lester version. Especially like one thing in particular, like when they're blowing the wind and everything's like, going away, and there's the guy on the roller skates. I mean, I had forgotten about that. I was like, I mean, that
roller skates, people losing wigs,
like the phone booth, like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah,
these guys trying to stay on the phone and to continue the phone call.
Yeah.
Wacky for wacky's sake.
Let's jump back real quick because I want to remind our audiences why Richard Lester was brought aboard. So Donner was originally shooting 2 movies at once, right? Superman 1 and Superman 2. The Salkinds were a couple of producers that were related, maybe brother, sister, father, son, husband, wife. I don't know. Ilya and something, right?
Alexander.
They thought he was behind schedule too much. They thought that he was over budget too much.
So he was, I believe he was, because not just to pause on that real quick, not only was he over budget, they eventually got to a point where they said, stop doing stuff for Superman 2. And focus only on Superman 1.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. So they ended up firing him And then they started on this second movie where they brought in Richard Lester. Now, Richard Lester has a relationship with the Salkinds, not a particularly great one, because Richard Lester directed The Three Musketeers and The Four Musketeers. That was a big... there was a problem with those movies because they were originally shot as one movie. All the actors, all the directors, all the crew, everyone on production thought they were making one movie. Their contracts... indicated that they were only making one movie. And then when they weren't going to be able to make their release date in time, the Salkinds, in their infinite wisdom, decided, hey, you know what? What if we turned it into 2 movies? And so it literally wasn't until the premiere that many of the people in the cast and crew found out, oh no, they're making 2 movies. They paid us for 1 movie and they're turning it into 2, which is why we now have the Salkind clause in all actors' contracts. With SAG actor contracts.
Oh, really?
That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
They must be notified well in advance or in post-production or something.
It has to stipulate how many movies you are making. Yeah, what the production is for. If it's more than 1, if it's a series, if it's several seasons, whatever. It has to stipulate, and that's specifically because of them. Richard Lester, who had a relationship with the Salkind family, he was one of the people that had sued over the Four Musketeers, and they won the lawsuit and made their money, but not as much as if they would have been paid for a second movie. Anyway, Lester, wanting to come back, felt like they still owed him, so he was willing to take on this movie because they owed him money.
Isn't that interesting? Yes. Did you see any of the behind the scenes about the relationship with the cast with him versus Donner? Did you see any of that
stuff?
Yes. I don't want to jump ahead if you're going to talk about it.
Well, we can talk about it. We can jump to it now.
Well, I just want to say that there's an interview with Terrence Stamp where he just straight up says Donner created a family atmosphere where everybody felt like family and everybody felt, I think, felt cared for and all of that stuff. Lester did not. He came in and he was there to save money, do things on budget, and Donner was much more interested in exploring things and trying things, and Lester was much more of go stand over there when you say that line. Okay, let's go. So very, very different directing styles. Although I would argue, I just like acting, I don't think there's a right directing style. I think they're just different, and I think that because I just real quick before we get too deep into it, I'll say I don't think the Lester version is a bad version of Superman 2. So I remember as a kid liking it a lot. So and we'll get into the Donner version more deeply. But anyway,
to your point, Ned Beatty, Gene Hackman, Valerie Perrine, and E.G. Marshall all refused to come back and do reshoots with Lester. Margot Kidder said she did not have a good time. In fact, it was an interview with Margot Kidder in 2004 that they give credit for the Donner cut. Because in 2004, she does this interview where she says, all that footage that he made is sitting in a vault somewhere. That prompted someone to make an online website, which kept getting more and more and more and more popular. So finally, 2006, 2007, we got the Donner cut.
Yep.
Kind of fascinating.
I don't know if you want to jump on something else, but if you want to get into the edit itself of the Donner cut, there's some interesting stuff with that specifically. So I heard a story, and I don't know how true it is, but so if you've watched the Donner cut, I think the majority of people feel that the Donner cut, at least I feel that way, and maybe you do too. I think you do. I don't think it's a great movie. I don't think it's a great cut. I don't think it's a great movie. I don't think it ultimately worked as well as the Superman 2 theatrical movie that we got eventually from Richard Lester's version. Part of the reason that it doesn't work, obviously, I think, is because he didn't really get to finish shooting his movie. So
Fair.
He shot a bunch of stuff. And then now he's filling in with maybe some stuff that he had from Lester and, whatever. The story I heard, whether or not it's true, I don't know. But the story I heard was that Warner Brothers gave him a certain amount of money to do the Donner cut. It was not a lot of money. And he became frustrated with the fact that he didn't have a lot of money. And eventually kind of leveraged it to the editor to sort of finish it.
Interesting.
And so, even though it's called the Donner Cut, I have mixed feelings about whether or not I don't think it's the movie he wanted to make. I think it's a movie he ended up making.
Right. It's more of Donner's editor's cut.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was there, and I think he approved some stuff and whatever. I mean, even it's 2006, so you look at like some of the and we knew it going in, right? We know it's not a finished product. The special effects aren't finished. There's a lot of like sort of animatic or like early CG kind of terrible stuff. I mean, some of it looked like, I was like, was that straight out of the Avid? Like nobody even did After Effects on the thing. It looked very elementary. I mean, kids in high school could, run circles around that now, but it was a different time. And so it was what it was for what it was. But I just thought that was an interesting thing with the editor that like, okay, I'm done. We don't really have money to do what I actually wanted to do. So here you go.
Paul?
Yeah, I didn't care for the Donner Cut. I think the best world scenario is a combination of the two movies.
Yeah.
That I don't know. Has anyone made that? Someone should.
Well, somebody should, because the truth is, I think the biggest hole that we noticed that needed to be filled really was the moments with Marlon Brando. Now, there was a whole story behind the fact that he couldn't use footage. They couldn't use footage with Marlon Brando in Superman 2, the Lester version. What was the deal? They were prohibited because of his contract. Something happened with it.
It would cost too much, right?
Well, Marlon Brando was suing, in the middle of suing, so they were worried about the ramifications of that. Because also remember that Marlon Brando, as Paul told us, got 11% of the first one. So they were worried that he was going to get 11% of the second film as well. So they just said, I know he's suing us, but let's just cut it all out.
Okay, so that's why he's not represented in the Lester version.
Correct.
And so this version definitely takes care of all of that, and I think it clarifies a lot more about like how he gets his powers back and things like that, which I think is much clearer. I think that's the only thing that's clearer, to be honest. I think everything else is honestly, from an emotional standpoint, it becomes disappointing. I mean, last night, you know what? Let's pause real quick.
Yes, let's do it.
And let's play back our conversation before and after the movie last night. So here it is.
All right. Okay. First and foremost, I have drank a half bottle of wine while Sean has been drinking water.
I did have a lot of dark chocolate almonds, though.
So if I sound like I'm slurring, it's because I probably am. I mean, in all honesty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is before we're about to watch the Donner Cut of Superman 2. And right off the bat, there is the first card, before the film even starts, it says, the following film represents Superman 2 as it was originally conceived and intended to be filmed. If you listen to our last podcast, you know that 75%, maybe 80, I don't recall, of the film was shot by Richard Donner, and they scrapped it, and Richard Lester only used 20% of that footage.
Right.
So I'm expecting to see a drastically different film.
I just wish that it's been so long since I've seen the Richard Lester one. I don't know that I have enough of a memory of the comparison to know. But either way, I'm excited. I know I have seen this before.
Yes.
But I mean, it was 15. When did this come out? 10 years ago?
The Donner Cut?
Yeah.
2006.
Yeah. So that's when I saw it.
I've never seen the Donner Cut.
Yeah.
So this is all new to me. I've read that there are some unfinished pieces that are a part of it, almost animatics.
And by the way, I have some stories about that. So
okay.
Yeah, I'm interested to chat about
we can
that.
cut to that on the other end.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see this film. Incidentally, I will also note that the Donner Cut is approximately 10 minutes shorter than the Richard Lester cut.
Right.
So apparently we're going to see a more precise film.
I'm excited.
All right, let's do this.
Let's do it. Okay, so we just finished watching Superman 2, the Donner Cut. We're going to talk about it on the show, but just quick, first impression.
It is a different movie. It is fascinating. Every now and then you get two cuts of the same movie. And this is one of those moments. It's a different it is a completely different film.
I think to say it's a different film is almost an understatement. It's rough, and there's things to talk about with that, which we'll talk about in the show.
Oh my God.
Okay, let's go over some of the differences between the Donner and the Lester cut.
Let's do it.
All right. Opening sequence right off the bat. The Donner cut uses an entire recap of Superman.
Well, so does Superman. So does the theatrical cut.
This has a new scene where Lois figures out that Clark is Superman immediately by drawing on the glasses. That's entirely new.
Well, that's not like.
But that's not part of the recap.
Yeah.
That's we're into the new movie at that point.
Sorry, let's talk about that because that's not part of it.
Can I just say though too, the recap is painful and long and unnecessary. In my opinion, I mean, I guess for the time frame, like, okay, let's face it. During that time, a lot of people would have seen a movie in the movie theater and not seen it again. Maybe they saw it on television a little bit, maybe not. And then they would go and see if it was a sequel, they would see that, right? So maybe they felt they needed this recap to be so specific and long. I didn't like
Rocky
it.
2 didn't. Well, Rocky 2 kind of did, but Godfather 2 didn't do it. The Empire Strikes Back didn't do it. It was unnecessary.
Yeah.
Wait, but Rocky 2's, what was Rocky 2's?
They do recap. Sorry, the end of. Forget I said that. They do recap the end of Rocky.
Right.
Before
it
going
starts
into
at the
Rocky
end.
2.
Yeah.
Well, but that's...
But they sort of just replay it. They don't show the whole movie.
Yeah, I mean, starting at the end to me is different than a whole. I mean, the recap is like, okay, oh, we're back in Krypton, and there's a moment where we were actually watching it, and I was like, oh, are they going to give us more information? Is there something happening in this scene? And like, no, this is just a recap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought of the biggest problem with that is we just saw Captain America: Brave New World recently, and it opens up with the James Bond opening, as myself and Adam Witt have called it, because, you know, with James Bond, you get this huge action sequence establishing, you know, at least who he is, if not something that will affect the rest of the film, and then we get credits. So opening with the big Paris scene, you know, is like having an action sequence to kick off the movie.
100%.
And I was missing that with Donner. We just went right into like whatever, you know, let's go to Niagara Falls, you know. So I thought that kind of establishing, let's remember who Superman is, and he does good, and he saves people, and he saves Lois specifically, and so that was, I thought, was missing here.
I completely agree. And on top of that, by, you know, doing what the difference there with that opening sequence is now we aren't using the nuclear explosion from Paris to, you know, set the Phantom Zone free. Instead, we're using it. It was one of the missiles from the California.
Yeah, which I actually think is a better choice. So again, I think this whole thing is got to put the two movies together. They both make good and horrible decisions.
Yeah, I actually do really like that point of view, and I do hope that somebody does that. I think it'd be fun to watch.
Okay, let's go back to new scene where Lois figures out Clark is Superman in the opening sequence. Like it? Don't like it?
Don't like it at all. I don't like it at all. It's just, first of all, it's too soon.
It's way too soon
in the movie. We've basically just finished the recap.
Yeah.
And now we're like, wait a second. And honestly, you know, she's definitely questioning this a lot. I don't know. It's too, and it's also really goofy. It's so goofy.
A better choice, in my opinion, if you're going to do the recap where she has the one line where it starts in Superman 1.
Right.
Where she mentions, she's like, Superman is here and Clark is not. You know, right off the bat. It's just
right.
Like, just recap that one line.
Right.
If in case we forgot that she already suspects. I thought it was way too soon.
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
yeah.
You know, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lois jumping out of the window of the Daily Planet to test Clark.
Not as impactful as the Niagara Falls fall.
I completely
And
agree.
he uses laser eyes in the middle of a busy New York street and nobody notices.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a bad call.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Laser eyes. Yeah, I completely agree. And then, of course, the next one.
And he's Clark.
Yeah.
You know, so like Clark Kent has laser eyes. No one saw this?
No,
Right.
Yeah.
A bad call.
Yeah.
Lois pulls a gun and shoots Clark, revealing he's Superman.
One thing I want to say about that scene that I found out in my research was that I was doing it like 1 a.m. Is that that footage is test footage.
Yeah,
It's not a proper.
No
that's why it
wonder-
looks like crap
Yeah,
because
the-
and why it's one setup. The whole scene is one setup.
Yeah.
so
the set looks terrible.
yeah, because it's just a screen test.
You don't have the big honeymoon suite that
Right.
they
Yeah.
give. So, and he's even doing scenes with a different actress in the test footage, apparently.
Oh.
And if I'd love to watch it again because apparently he noticeably changes hairstyles and weight throughout the scene because things
Yeah.
have changed. He obviously bulked up by the time he made the movie.
It's so funny you say that because I was thinking as I was watching it, I was like, why does his hair look so long in this?
Yeah.
And I didn't. Yes, thank you for saying that. Yeah.
So they put the disclaimer at the top saying
Yeah.
that you're going to experience that, but I still didn't think it was that jarring. I was expecting full on like grainy black and white footage, that's
Yeah.
like clearly not in the world of the movie. But
16
the
millimeter.
guy did a fine job if that was something he really, really wanted to keep, which I think losing the glasses in the fire and reaching him with your hand is fine enough.
Right.
Yeah.
To show he's.
I mean, I think it's a sideways choice to some degree, but I will also say I don't think that scene is as good. I don't think that the Donner scene is as good. I don't think that the whole thing is just in general, the Donner cut for me lacks impact and
Paul's just letting gas
told
go
you.
over here.
I told you my chair makes noise. I was like, it's going to happen during the show.
I think the Donner cut just lacks impact and emotionality. Like
100%.
every time, because I remember as a kid watching Superman 2 and definitely feeling some things in certain moments. I'm like, oh my God, you know what I mean? And in the Donner cut, it was more like, oh, okay, yeah, now we're going to that. Okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel as much. And again, maybe that was because these are things the editor finished and Donner walked away from or was just like, that's good enough. I'm kind of done. We don't have a budget. So
yeah. I did like that she shot him with a blank though.
yeah.
It wasn't her actually going to kill Clark Kent if she's wrong. She
Right.
hedged her bet, which I did appreciate about that. But for the most part, I agree. It is it's a sideways move,
It's
if
a-
anything.
yeah.
But I definitely think it came way
And
too
she's
early.
got to think in advance to bring this gun with blanks.
Right.
Whereas in Niagara Falls, where she, wants to prove he's Superman, she jumps in the water. That
Right.
sort of seems like, here, I got to figure this out, you
Right.
know, so.
And also, I even brought this up to Sean in the middle of the movie, that Superman could have just seen that they were blanks. He wouldn't have noticed that there wasn't a bullet in that chamber.
Yes,
With
but
his
while there's a
X-ray vision?
bullet.
Or that a bullet didn't fly at him.
Right.
Or hit him.
Right.
Or you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe was the gun made of lead?
It didn't bounce off of him.
It didn't.
It did
No.
nothing.
I mean, I would think that, okay, I mean, in the world of Superman, like if a bullet hits him, I think he still feels it.
Well, he also would have seen
Right.
it. He definitely would have
Yeah.
seen it.
Yeah. So,
You've seen the famous shots of the Tommy gun, just
Yeah.
ping, 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 ping,
Yeah.
off his chest.
Yeah.
Nothing that, he didn't,
so he wouldn't be like,
he didn't feel it, but it didn't hurt.
what just happened?
Also, the moment that I appreciated in the theatrical cut was that moment with the hand in the fire, and he pulls it away, and he's almost ashamed to show her his hand because he knows this is it. You
Yeah.
know, she says, "Let me see, let me see."
And the physicality of grabbing and holding hands for a second, there's something to all
Exactly.
that connection that's lost with the gun.
100%.
Also, on top of that, I mentioned this to Sean. The scene of them going into the honeymoon suite, which is 30 seconds long in the Donner cut, you go from Lex saying, "All right, we're going on a journey," and then we get, less than 30 seconds of, "Oh, we're checking into the suite," and then we cut back. It's like, here we are at the Fortress of Solitude.
it's very
I was like,
disjointed.
this entire movie felt disjointed
Yeah.
for me. It was like,
Yeah.
it's interesting that I say I thought we were going to see a more precise movie. I don't think so.
Yeah.
We saw a more disjointed film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I 100%.
Yeah, it's all kind of impersonal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it is.
doesn't reach out and grab, and, wrap its arms around you. It's just sort of stuff happens, and then hopefully you're into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tone and humor, just in general. Donner cut, more serious and mythic tone.
It's fine
consistent with
taking out the
Superman.
goofy stuff for Non. That's
Right.
fine. Like he didn't need to be such a doof.
Yeah.
But Donner apparently like lashed out at that and said some stuff about like, oh, it's just too weird and goofy. I'm going to change that. Well, look, did you see the end of Lethal Weapon 4? Like you have a propensity for being goofy too.
Yeah.
Right,
You know,
right,
the whole
right.
plot ends and then you got like 15 minutes of like crazy baby birthing comedy bits with Gibson and the gang in Lethal Weapon 4. So he'll do the funny stuff. But yeah, I guess I agree. The Mount Rushmore bit gone, replaced by the Washington Monument toppling over.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, it was just overall, yeah, he took the funny out. And again, it was a mixed bag to me of good job here and there. Could have used maybe a little lightness here and there. So
what were the
make
moments?
one movie. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go out and make this movie. We cut them both together.
What were the
If
moments?
only we knew the Phantom editor.
I think we do.
Oh my gosh. We got to get
Can't believe he
Nichols
hasn't
on
done
this.
it yet.
What for you guys? What were the good moments, the good choices, other than the Marlon Brando stuff, which I think we all agree on? What else about Donner's cut did you like?
I'm going to go back to that. The establishing of the relationship between him and his father there. The follow up on that, I thought all of that stuff was really great.
Yeah.
I really did. And, you know, in the end, and this is, if you haven't seen the Donner cut, I mean, we're spoiling it anyway. So if you're still listening.
It came out in 2006. If you haven't seen it, I'm not sorry.
You know, at the very end, I had always wondered as a kid, how does Superman get his power back?
Right.
Because you don't see it.
No.
He finds the green crystal and that's it. But now it's like, you know, Jor-El saying, you can have your power back. I can no longer talk to you after that because it takes everything here to give it back to you.
I do want to say, as a storytelling device, I'm not against the idea in the theatrical cut that, you know, how does he get his power back? And he sees the green crystal, and as an audience, we fill in.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of letting your audience fill things in and not spoon feeding everything. I hate when
Agreed.
filmmakers do that.
Agreed,
It drives
Star
me
Wars.
batty. Yeah, right? So I do think that storytelling device that Lester used didn't not work. I think it did actually work. But I will say that I did enjoy seeing the father-son relationship. I don't know if I buy all the dialogue of the father becomes the son and the son blah blah blah. Like I was a little I mean, you're just talking about the transfers of powers, you know, bring John Travolta back, but you know, I don't know. So that part I question mark that, but
Two of the most controversial things, if you want to call them controversial, the things that people did not like about the Lester cut definitely were cut, and that is the stuff the battle that happens in the Fortress of Solitude. In Lester's version, we've got, you know, the S that they throw, where we've never established that. Where's that in Superman lore? Apparently it was worked back into the comic books in like 2007. That happens along with
After the Donner cut.
Along
Weirdly.
with the kiss, which has never happened before, except in both of these. I guess Richard Donner had a run of Superman with Action Comics for a little while, so he worked back in some of these things that Lester had established. But the S and the teleportation, like at what point can Kryptonians teleport? Which as a kid I totally bought, and in all honesty, I kind of missed that battle here, but it was taken out. So, you know, you could argue that, all right, the bad stuff from Lester was removed.
I want to say about the things that happened there, the S and the sort of the whoa, like there,
the teleporting,
the teleporting and all that stuff,
and the holograms.
There was an interesting video on YouTube about all of that, and the guy kind of does a dive into like older Superman comics and sometimes weird powers that suddenly Superman would have. And in one comic, he literally shoots out of his hand a tiny Superman, like, and then he showed the image, and you're like, yeah, that's a tiny Superman coming out of Superman's hand, and you're just like, what the heck? So you could argue that it's not out of the realm of possibility that he would have powers that we aren't aware of, that we don't know about. They're not. I mean, how often is he using the kissing power? Probably not a lot. You know. So when I go back to the Lester cut, so to your point, I did miss that battle.
Yeah.
By the time we get to, okay, you're gonna go in the box and you're gonna lose all your powers and all that stuff.
Happens
I was
way
like,
too fast.
I was like, whoa, we're like, there's no drama here. It's just we're here in your house and now we're in charge and da da da, and
Yeah.
you know, and they constantly go back and forth between, we're going to kill Luthor, we're not going to kill Luthor, and him trying to sort of, I mean, it was clear that they really did need Gene Hackman to come back and fill in some, because there's definitely some holes in all of that stuff too. So, but anyway, just thought I'd mention that.
Well, I didn't get to chime in on the biggest change that he made that was good, which is all John Williams all the time.
100%.
So-
I was going to bring that up later.
I
Favorite
forget the
moments
guy's
in the
name.
film, and the score is the number one thing that I missed.
You can hear the edits to, time things out with scenes, because obviously Williams isn't going in, and he was working on, he worked constantly in the 80s, couldn't go back and change that score, but you can hear where they modified it to time out correctly with how a scene works, but just, just Williams, always a good choice.
Yeah, I agree.
100%.
Wait, I'm a little confused though. So, what Lester's cut does not have Williams throughout?
It has the theme, and then another guy kind of filled in the rest.
Oh my God, I really want to go back and
Kinda
watch
like-
this Lester cut. It's been so long since I've seen that one.
Yeah.
Kind of like Superman Returns, which we'll get to. I mean,
Yeah.
they used the theme because it's a good idea.
Yeah.
But then another guy did the rest of the score. It might have been Ottman, maybe John
Yeah.
Ottman, because I think he did
Interesting.
Bryan Singer stuff.
And then, of course, the biggest thing at the very end of the Donner cut versus the Lester cut was the ending, where, once again, Superman comes in, he turns back time and makes all of those events go away.
So you know that Superman, the first movie, so that was the how Superman the first movie ended was not how it was supposed to end.
Okay. Fill me in.
And that's just something I one of the videos I saw behind the scenes thing was like the original ending was something else. This is all tied to the budget situation, and in the end they basically used what was supposed to be the ending for, I think, the second movie. They used it as the ending for the first one, so which is why, of course, it ends up just repeating itself.
Fascinating.
Right.
Yeah.
This is one where the movies were 0-2. Spinning back the world again is the most egregious choice the Donner cut makes.
100%.
Because halfway through, after Clark has destroyed the temple and he loses his powers and everything, and he goes back and he's sitting there regretting it. I'm like, well, just spin around the world a couple of times and fix this whole thing.
Yeah.
So but instead then I'm like, ha ha ha, and then he does it at the end, and he returns the three villains to the universe where
Yes.
they could escape again and wreak havoc again.
Yeah.
Bad call, Soup.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
that was a really, really bad choice, I think, to do that thing again. Not that the kiss is a great idea, but again, there's connection there. There's some charm between the two of them, and there's funny moments. But again, a thing that, like some other things we talked about, like throwing an S, not established. So it's a weird way to do it.
At the same time, though, once again, because of the connection of the two of them, you see the conflict in him of just like, she can't deal with this. It's that moment where she says, I'm in love with you and I'm jealous of the whole world.
Yeah.
That's very weighty.
Yeah.
And so he realizes, it hurts me, but I have to set her free. Like, I don't know. Yes, the kiss is weird. At the same time, though, it's motivated. Where this one, I just went, oh yeah, we're spinning around again because we did it the first time too. Okay.
Yeah, the kiss is a better choice of two not great choices.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
There, one moment that stood out to, I think, both me and Justin in the Donner cut was when he's having the conversation with his father about taking away his powers and becoming a human fully. Lois Lane is standing above in wearing, I guess, the Superman shirt, and watching the whole thing sort of unfold. And then
He's got it there. It's his date night bag.
It's his date night bag,
That's
yeah,
why he had
yeah,
like the
yeah.
whole table setting with
Yeah.
the champagne. The chicks
He's
coming
like,
over. I
"Hey."
got the soup shirt. I got
Chicks dig this. Oh, hold on, let me turn on some music. But the other thing that was strange about that is at the end of the conversation, they have Marlon Brando look up at her. And I don't know if that moment is supposed to be, you son of a, like, why did you do this to my son, or like be careful. I don't know what the intention of that look is, or look what you've done, or I mean, I have no idea what the intention of that look is supposed to be. But anyway, that's in there too.
I actually liked that part.
I did too. I didn't dislike it. I just don't know what it means. I mean, it's like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know what that means.
I appreciated her watching him give these things up. But at the same time, this goes back to both movies. Sean and I talked about this a little. How could Superman not have the forethought to say, yeah, I'm going to become human and I'll be Clark all the time. And, oh yeah, Lois is still going to love me. You're not the guy anymore.
Right.
You are not that guy.
Yeah. And it was a little too soon for me in the franchise in general for him to make that choice.
Yeah.
Not that they're thinking in franchises back then.
Right.
Except for these two movies, shot back to back. But I'm like, ooh, that soon? He's like, I'm done.
Well, yeah, I agree with that because, we talked about in the last episode that he was essentially doing his training for 12 years or whatever it was, where he's listening to all this education from his father, which apparently is supposed to be about the universe, like, right? Galaxies and I'm sure handling humans and what to do and what might be expected of him, or what this journey might sort of look like for him, knowing that he's going to have these powers and they don't, and that they're going to, and so he's had 12 years of training. He goes into the city, gets a job, and then, some stuff happens, and then he falls in love almost immediately.
Yeah.
And then decides, what, this isn't for me. And I agree. It's way, way too fast, because there's no reference in either of the movies that Superman has done anything prior to coming to Metropolis and starting his journey of superhero-dom. Right? There's no reference to that. And then, so like I said, he comes in the city and then he falls in love and like, you know what? I'm good. Yeah, I don't want to do this anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I read, and I don't know if this is true because I didn't rewatch the theatrical cut. In the Richard Lester version, Clark gives up his powers and becomes mortal before sleeping with Lois. And in the Donner cut, he gives up his powers after.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Like, interesting choice for just Lester to be like, no, I'm going to have it do it before. Yeah.
What do you think is, I mean, I find that interesting. I do think the Donner choice is maybe stronger.
I agree.
Yeah.
But also,
well, yeah, it seems like something he can win by doing that.
Yeah.
Doing it in the first place, giving
Right.
up his powers.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll cut to the end and say I think Lester's choice to have Soup return the flag to the White House and tell the president, I'm sorry, I won't let you down again.
Yeah.
And then end credits is way better than ending on the revenge he gets on the redneck, like at the bar. Like,
Right.
We're ending on revenge. He goes
Right.
back, he beats a guy up. There's a funny line, been working out or whatever. But I think him with the flag, with the American flag, is just a great visual.
It is.
And a great moment, and he apologizes for not being there. He's learned something. We've all learned something. Roll credits instead of just like, vengeance is the way, kids. Credits. I'm like, wait, what? Go beat up that guy who said bad stuff about you.
Yep, exactly.
I 100% agree with that. That's actually my notes that like I missed that moment in general. Just that button up, and also is there not another moment with Lex at the end? Because I know so I did find a deleted scene. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this deleted scene. It's terrible. And it's Superman and Lois at the Fortress of Solitude walking out with Lex while where's that supposed to be? The Antarctic or wherever he's supposed to be?
The Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
The North, Arctic Circle. The Arctic police
what?
snowmobiles are actually outside of the Fortress of... I'm not even kidding you. They're outside of the Fortress of Solitude while they are walking Lex to them, and Lex is trying to make some deal with Superman to like stay free or something. He's like, I'll do it for 10%, and then and then they keep doing this, but he's like 5%, and then they're like putting him in the Arctic police mobile, and he's like 4%, and he gets all the way down to 1%. I mean, they keep the bit going. It is terrible.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay. from either of the movies, what could you...
From either of the same movies.
From either of the same movie. Can you go ahead and think of something that was your favorite movie?
That was our favorite what?
A favorite moment?
Favorite moment.
Think of something our favorite moment.
I did not get a lot of sleep last night. Let's be honest. Yes, I'm obviously all over the place
You're good.
this morning.
Well, a favorite moment? Go, Paul. Go.
Well, just for comedy's sake, I love when Superman showed, like, they're, Zod, they're all on the Daily Planet, and Zod's gonna, like, okay, well, we're going to kill him now, kill Lex, and what? And the whole thing. And then Superman shows up, and Lex goes, Superman, thank God. I mean, get him. Hackman is just so great at delivering those lines. I mean, he's top billing now. Yep. Brando was third billing. But yeah, I thought that was a great moment. Anytime he waves the hanky, it's just too funny.
I'll tell you something that I actually, it's part of the reason I wrote the bit at the top, that I find poignant, and that is Zod sitting in the Oval Office, and they're watching those things go tick, back and forth, and she says that line, like, you are the ruler of all you survey, and I'm like, yeah, he is. And he's like, yeah, no, so it was yesterday and the day before, because I've always wondered about this is one
Conquering
of the
a planet.
you guys will like this. I'm going to reference Marvel and Endgame again, because you guys enjoy when I bring this up. I like that you're both looking at me with daggers already. I haven't even said anything. I'm going to say something good, which is Thanos is one of the few bad guys I've ever seen in a movie that really has such a huge, at least to him, huge justification for the horror he wants to do.
Right.
In his mind, it is the righteous, terrible choice that has to be made. And so it grounds it in something other than just sinister evil for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Because I've always wondered about the people that are like, I'm going to take over. And then they take over and it's like, well, what happens now?
Right.
What happens now? And so they touch on that in this movie, which is they rule everything, and he's bored out of his mind.
Yeah.
Right? And he's so excited. I think he's excited when Superman's around. He's like, great, now I can have a fight, because this guy just wants to fight.
Yeah.
He thinks he wants to rule. What he really wants to do is destroy.
Yeah.
So that was a favorite. I do like
I'll
that.
make
I thought
another
that was
Marvel tie-in, is that, like I said, halfway through, when it seemed like Superman was regretting his choice of losing his power, I was like, well, just spin around the world again. Then, of course, they did that, and I went, what? I thought about the Avengers when, at the end of Infinity War, I'm like, well, they're just going to take the time stone, go back in time, and fix everything. And then, of course, they destroy the stones at the beginning of Endgame, and then they have to write their way out of it. I'm like, that's the ballsy choice. That's the really risky choice that I thought Avengers made there, that spinning around the world is not a risky or super intelligent choice. It's the easy way out.
Yeah.
One of my favorite moments of the theatrical cut is changed so much by Donner. Not only do we not have the music at that point, we also don't have the line. In the Donner cut, okay, Superman gets his power back from Jor-El, right? And then we cut to Daily Planet, and Lex is there, and they're threatening her, and they're waiting for Superman, and then all of a sudden, you see the air of the newspapers down on the street start to wave as he flies by, and then he flies by and he's outside the window. Do you recall what he says when he's outside the window in the Donner cut?
I don't recall, but I love that shot with the flags sort of hanging off the side of the building. And
in the Donner cut, he says, "Haven't you ever heard of freedom of the press?" That's his response, and then he leaves so they can chase after him, right? In the original, or in the theatrical cut, this is going back to the score is missing, because I went back and I rewatched that specifically this morning. We cut from him in the Fortress of Solitude. He finds the thing, then we cut away. We're now at the Daily Planet, right? So we don't know what's happening.
Right.
And then while they're up there, while everything's going on and they're arguing, all of a sudden we cut down to the newspapers. And not only do we start to see the newspaper start to waver, we start to hear the bum 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 bum, and then he flies in and he's outside, and then he gives one of my favorite lines, because this is the Boy Scout. It's not an insult or quippy, haven't you heard of freedom of the press? He just says, "General Zod, care to step outside?"
Yeah.
Mirroring right back to when he was at the truck stop, and he said that to the same guy and got his ass handed to him.
Right.
But it's so great. It's him being a gentleman of like, let's let's take this outside. Come
Both
on.
both of the references that you guys brought up from the theatrical cut, that one and the one you brought up earlier, Paul, even in your retelling of it and my memory of it, I started to get goosebumps. I started to feel something which I didn't feel in the Donner cut, and that was again and again and again. I just didn't feel as much in the Donner cut. You could argue that some of that was because the footage wasn't, final. They're using test stuff. They're filling in. I don't think it was just that. I think there was writing stuff. There was other stuff going on, and I think it's just missing so much for me. I'll say this: other than the father stuff, I don't know that the Donner cut adds anything for me. I think I would have been fine just having the Lester cut exist.
Maybe you could trim down the Lester cut. Well, again, of course, I think the ultimate choice is
combining
them. But there are things you could take out of the Lester cut that might make it a little cleaner and better. But I agree with you. Otherwise.
Yeah. Lester clearly had the tools at his disposal to make the film. In fact, he was originally going to have a co-directing credit with Donner. Donner said no, and then Lester was like, according to DGA rules, you have to have shot 51% of the film. So they continued shooting and shooting and shooting until they got to their 80%, which was interesting.
Wow.
But what I was saying is yes, the Donner version hurts me. I don't like it as much, but I also feel like he wasn't able in 2006 to bring John Williams back and rescore this thing. He didn't have all the tools.
But that's what I'm saying.
He had one hand behind his back the entire time.
Yeah.
And he's probably also trying to recapture what his intention was 20 years earlier, which is how, what's that like?
And again, I 100% agree with you. I 100% even agree with Donner basically throwing his hands, if this really happened, throwing his hands up and being like, okay, you go ahead and finish it to the editor. Because at a certain point, if somebody says, hey, we want you to finish your movie, here's $60,000, or whatever it was, and you're like, oh, great, all right, well, I'm going to sit and look at the Avid and we're going to, make a couple of cuts and great. I support the fact that he, whatever that decision was, and I think it was in some ways it was almost like good old college try, but it doesn't hit the mark, because I agree he didn't have the tools, because in reality what needed to happen was a lot more than what did happen,
right?
Because it is really in many ways it's just an alternate cut of the movie,
100%.
And because that footage with Marlon Brando and all that stuff, I remember the first time I saw it, like that stuff really struck me, just in like, oh my God, there's more of this, like what? Oh, that's awesome, but now hearing the story of why they couldn't use it, so the stuff was there. It wasn't like it didn't exist. They just couldn't. They didn't want to use it for legal reasons, basically. So they kind of wrote their way out of it and that kind of stuff. But
they used him in Superman Returns, and that freed up the licensing to use the Brando's likeness again. It is weird to not have him there at the top of the movie when he was obviously the main lawyer, for lack of a better word,
main lawyer, head engineer,
accusing
scientist,
accusing the three villains, at the top. But instead, they just don't have him there and recreate that whole scene. It's weird.
Right.
Yeah. We should get Richard Donner on this podcast and ask him all these questions.
Yeah,
and I've got a way to do it. All we have to do is spin around the planet
just gonna say.
several times back to 2001, keep him from dying, and then bring him back.
Right.
I think it's possible.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely possible.
It's the way out of everything.
You know what? Can you just plug that into ChatGPT? I'm sure it'll have some sort of answer about how we can do that.
Side note that I was telling Sean, because I had mentioned that it's very rare that you get to see a re-edit of a film by someone else telling a different story. This has different footage altogether, so it's especially rare. But I had brought up 3,000 Miles to Graceland. Have you seen both cuts of that movie?
I've seen neither.
Okay.
And I love Costner. I should have by now. And Russell.
But you know the story behind it.
I don't.
Okay. They made 3,000 Miles to Graceland. Costner was very unhappy with how things were going. Talked to the producers. Russell was very unhappy. They both ended up hiring their own editor to cut the film. The one that was released is essentially mostly the Kurt Russell with a little bit of Kevin Costner. But on the DVD, kids, if you have a DVD, the 2-set DVD, you can watch the Kevin Costner version. Kurt Russell's version is something like, under 2 hours. Kevin Costner's version is 3 plus, obviously. And a whole lot more Kevin. Because not only does he love himself, he also loves those long, slow shots. Not knocking it. I'm a fan of all of that. I love me some Kevin Costner, especially. You know, he does Westerns right, and I love the way he does Westerns. Anyway, side note. So, kids out there, you want to see another alternate cut, watch 3,000.
Well, the next thing I want to see now in our natural progression of Superman 2 is Superman 2, the Donner cut with the commentary track, which apparently features Donner and Terrence Stamp and some other people. So you're going to have to find yourself a physical copy of it and then play the alternate track.
I feel like I heard it. I don't remember it, though.
I have the physical copy. I just couldn't find it last night when I decided to watch this thing. So we got it off of Prime. I do have the Blu-ray of the Donner
Well, then
cut.
you definitely have. Yeah.
So I've got the commentary somewhere. That's really interesting.
That is. I want to say this, too. This came up in my research, which is the effect that Superman, the movie, and probably Superman 2 to some degree, and that, you know, and I want to say I love Richard Donner otherwise, so I think he's awesome. But the effect that he had on future superhero movies.
Yes.
And somebody did a video sort of honoring that, and I think what they said is true, in that because he wanted to approach Superman in a serious way, and he really did, especially in the first movie. We have the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we have. We have DC trying to do their thing. We have things that are wanting to take themselves seriously, and I think that's part of what Superman 2 suffers from on the Lester side, is that influence, and we've talked about this on the last episode, of, you know, the old Batman series and what superheroes used to be for movies and television, right? Because let's face it, when we were kids, when you were a teenager, was it cool to like Superman or like Batman? Was that a cool thing?
Not as a teenager, no.
No, it wasn't. Now,
Star Wars, yeah.
Maybe. But now, any of that stuff, totally, for sure, you can love that, no problem. And I think part of that is because it is grounded more in truth, more in some sort of substance, and wanting to explore, I guess, our commonalities, and not just our differences in terms of, like, well, that guy can fly, great, you know what I mean? Like, so anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge Richard Donner for that and thank him for that, because at the end of the day, he's the reason that I think we do have, you know, and it went on to, like, you know, I mean, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, if you look at the beats for that movie are Superman the movie.
Oh yeah.
It's literally the same movie, it's just Spider-Man's story instead of Superman's. But yeah.
Yeah, you kind of bridge the gap because you talk about Batman being cornball on television. And it's funny, I was watching this movie last night, and my fiance just kept looking at the TV like, this is like kind of corny. I'm like, yeah, but it captures Action Comics cornball. You kind of got to be square to be in the world of Superman.
Right.
He's the goodest. I mean, he's the goodest person there is. Someone asked me recently, your favorite. What was your favorite Disney characters? And I was like, oh, I think we're including, like, everybody, because Indiana Jones. Now, if you're counting the IP takeovers, for sure. But
I like that. I feel like that's a little bit of a get out of jail free card. But okay.
The other two are Woody. They bought Pixar, and then Captain America. They bought Marvel.
Right.
But I looked at Woody and Captain America, and I'm like, these two are just the ultimate good.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Optimistic.
what Superman is too. You know, just the ultimate good. And it may seem super square, but it does. So you obviously had to evolve from that into what we have today with Marvel and make it hip and make it technologically advanced and all these other things. But yeah, so it bridged the gap from the cornball to what we have today quite well. I agree with you there.
It is interesting because you can see the steps of just like, okay, first we got Donner with Superman, and then there was another level of reality the first time we try to bring Batman into reality as opposed to, you know, the goofy comedy with the Tim Burton, and then you know, they went downhill with Batman Returns and all those Batmans, but then we got another real grounded version of superheroes with the first X-Men. And it was like, oh yeah, this is okay. And certainly with X-Men 2. X-Men 2 is very much in our world dealing with issues that we deal with as people.
100%.
And then Batman Begins comes along, and now Batman Begins is like, no, you realize somebody could be a Batman.
Right.
Holy crap.
Oh yeah, that's why I love that movie.
You know,
100%.
taking it to that next level.
Yeah.
And then you do see these progressions take place up to, the most current form, which is really sad. What if superheroes were a-holes, and then you get to the boys,
Right.
If in a real world, why wouldn't Superman be an absolute ass?
Right. Right.
So it is really interesting to see those progressions. However, going back to your point, we have yet to see a Superman who is the Boy Scout living in this world, being happy, being optimistic,
People liking him.
people like
That's
him.
the thing. They hate him in these Snyder movies. It's making
Well,
me crazy.
I will say this: I'm interested to see James Gunn's take on that situation, because I do. Of course, these Superman movies, I think, and to some degree, of course, obviously have aged because they are older, but compared to like how we would tell these stories now. I'm interested to see how James Gunn. I would like to see a balance between giving us a Superman that we can love again, giving us the Boy Scout again, but also I do think grounding it in some reality.
Yeah.
The reality of that circumstance of being. And of course James Gunn changes it because now he's bringing in all these other superheroes, which I have really strong mixed feelings about. One of the I'm jumping around, but one thing I really want to say about Superman the movie and Superman 2 is it's just Superman.
Yeah.
There's no other superheroes on the planet.
Yeah.
And I that idea to me is also really interesting because that there is a sense of loneliness there, but then there's also the sense of if you're someone who fell off a bridge and broke your neck, like where was Superman? He saved that person over there, but can't come over here. Like what? And he's only on the East Coast. We got stuff going on here in California.
He couldn't handle everything in Metropolis when,
Right.
when the Zod and the gang were tearing things up, so he split. He's like, I can't.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think that part of the story, I'm sure that would create an anger in society, right? That there is this person who does represent hope, that does represent something amazing. One of my favorite moments in Superman Returns is him listening in space and then flying down to, I think he rescues someone or does, maybe it's the airplane moment or whatever. I can't remember what the moment is after that. But I like the idea that two things. One, he's in space because maybe that's the one place he can finally get quiet, but that's also the place that he can maybe hear everything if he has the super hearing and whatever. And I guess and then there's that idea of like, he has to make the choice all the time of you've heard that philosophical theory of like the train, right? Like the people are on the train tracks, 2 people are here, 7 people are here, but you're going to go on the train tracks either way. So which one do you choose? You have to choose one. Which one do you choose?
Right.
And that's like the impossible choice, right? He has to make that impossible choice all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with you. We don't need a bunch of other characters mucking that up. That's plenty to concentrate on. But again, back then they weren't franchise building. They said, let's just make a great movie.
Right.
Now
right,
I think
right.
Gunn's got to look ahead to everything we want to see coming from DC in the future. We don't need that, but he set it up.
Yeah.
Starting to wrap it up. Superman 2, either version, better than Superman 1? Worse than Superman 1?
Rewatching, not as good. I used to like Superman 2 more because it seemed like when it finally got a ton of action and that kind of stuff. But I think overall the first one now, I've aged into it probably.
Interesting.
It's more
Okay.
epic and more, I mean, that was one of the things Lester said, oh, it's too much epic, blah, blah, blah. But I love that part.
I agree. I mean, I think I think also like age does make you look at it differently. I think when I was younger, Superman 2 was always on television, and I remember really enjoying that movie. And to Paul's point, lots of action and lots of cool things, lots of Superman being Superman. So that was fun. But now I would say I definitely prefer Superman the movie.
It's interesting because I would say the theatrical cut of Superman 2. But I can't tell you why. It makes me feel more, but it might be nostalgia that's making me feel more. The music in the theatrical cut makes me more excited than the music in the first one.
The theatrical cut, the non-John Williams.
Yeah.
Wow.
No. The theatrical cut
Of
has John
Superman
Williams.
2?
Yes, of Superman 2. Has John Williams in it.
No, just the theme.
Yes. That's what I'm referring to. As opposed to the theme seems almost gone completely from Donner. That's what I was saying. You're looking at me crazy. Didn't we have a whole conversation about this?
No.
We did, but I said that Donner restored John Williams. It was the best thing he did for the Donner cut, was to bring his whole score back, and he re-edited it to fit scenes, and I thought it was great. We didn't have Kent Wolf or whatever his name is.
Who was recommended by John Williams.
I think he did a good job of re-editing, but I don't think, to Justin's point, he didn't, and this is why it's not emotional and it doesn't have the impact. He didn't put in the big moments, those big score moments that really swell and land.
Yeah, it's clunky.
And maybe that was what they had to work with in the edit. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they had restrictions. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. No, but I would rank Superman 2 above Superman 1.
Wow.
I kind of grew into Star Trek: The Motion Picture as well.
Over Wrath of Khan.
I wouldn't put it over 2 though, but I put it over 3. I probably would put it towards the bottom of the Star Treks, but until I saw it recently in the New Beverly Cinema, big again, and I was just like, this movie's really great. And again, I think I've aged into it. I'm appreciating the slow pace. I appreciate the discovery, and the James Horner score is just phenomenal.
That'd be interesting to go back and watch.
Goldsmith. It's Goldsmith for the first one.
I haven't watched those in quite some time, but I mean, I always remember odds or evens first, then odds. 2, 4, 6, 1, 3, 5 is the order. I think 1 might jump up there more than 6.
I mean, you're probably right. 2, 4. Yeah, but it's probably, I'd take 1 over 6 now.
Yeah.
My favorite Star Trek movie is Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock. I love that movie. I don't know. I just love the personal storyline of it, the weightiness and the sort of ragtag crew, kind of sensibility of like, we got to do this, we got to steal the ship, we got to go get our friend, and hopefully we can get out of this alive. Right. I love Star Trek 3. That's my favorite one.
Okay, real quick, we're gonna play a quick game. These are taglines. You have a choice: IMDb, Box Office Mojo, TV Guide, or Poster.
Oh, let's go TV Guide.
Nope, I'm going to give you the line. You tell me what it was.
Okay, great. All right. I didn't know anything.
It's a game where you tell me what you want to hear.
Jeopardy. You're not picking a category.
TV Guide. It's TV Guide.
So we've got IMDb, Box Office Mojo, TV Guide, and Posters. By the way, this is the original TV Guide description of this.
Okay.
Which is hilarious.
All right.
All right. I'll give you an easy one.
Okay. All right.
The Man of Steel meets his match. IMDb, Box Office Mojo, TV Guide, or Poster.
I'm going to go TV Guide.
Yeah.
Poster. That was a poster.
Really?
All right. Yes.
That's a terrible
line. The Man of Steel
line
meets his match.
After the beauty of "You'll Believe a Man Can Fly," your second tagline is Superman met his match.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Miraculously freed from eternal orbit, the 3 outlaws from Krypton descend to Earth for the ultimate confrontation. IMDb, Box Office Mojo, TV Guide, Poster.
I'm going to go IMDb.
Same here, but I think that and Box Office Mojo probably don't vary much.
They don't very much, but you are correct. It is IMDb.
Boom.
Okay. Once again, IMDb, Box Office Mojo, TV Guide, or Poster. Superman 2 follows Superman as he battles 3 criminals from the planet Krypton who are released from the Phantom Zone.
Box Office Mojo.
Yeah, I'll second that.
TV Guide.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh?
All right. 2 more. The Man of Steel is back and better than ever.
That's a poster too. Now you get me to think that shorter means poster.
Yeah.
Shorter does mean poster.
Okay.
And 100%, because it doesn't give you enough. All right, our final one. Superman agrees to sacrifice his powers to start a relationship with Lois Lane, unaware that 3 Kryptonian criminals are inadvertently released. He inadvertently released our conquering Earth. Do you want me to read it again?
No, but that's a long one. So who makes room for that? TV Guide.
Yeah, yeah.
Box Office Mojo.
Damn it.
They're the only ones who mention Lois Lane.
Huh.
Isn't that interesting?
That's messed up, man.
It's messed
They've
up.
got the mojo.
Yeah, they do have the mojo.
That is messed up.
Any further thoughts?
Yeah, I love when Superman acts at the end. Tell you what, have them come over to this chamber, and then he says, "Don't go in there! Don't go in there! Oh, Luthor, you poisonous snake!" And I love how just his acting is great.
Yeah.
Superman acting, which is hilarious.
Yes.
and it's totally doubles down on the cornball stuff I was telling you. You poisonous snake. It's a great line.
Yeah.
It's totally square, and
Oh, yeah.
I just love that. And then it's contrasted later when there's a great line I never saw before, and I can't remember if it's in both cuts, but in the Donner cut, Lois says something about being Superman's girlfriend, and he goes, "Oh yeah." I loved that. He's like, "Oh yeah." It's like, that's the best. And he's bringing a little mojo of his own, Superman. So
That's pretty
but
funny.
anyway, yeah, we did. I mean, I could go on and on about Christopher Reeve, but I wanted to go on a little bit more with those two lines, at least right before we cut out.
I will say this
so
once
great.
again, watching him, there are just so many close-ups. I don't know if the color of his eyes have been altered in these things, but they are so unbelievably blue.
Yeah.
Like it's like there is no bluer blue than
Skin is
that.
perfect.
I do feel like the like what we watched last night probably had a new color pass, and everybody's doing all these color things, like utilizing DaVinci Resolve and all. I mean, you can bring out this little, and
In
it's
06?
fine, it's great, but
In 06?
No, the one we watched last night was an HD version.
Yeah.
So I think it was even that might have been updated. That's just my opinion, but I might be wrong.
And I do want to say one more thing, because we have something at the Movie Guys called the Movie Guysopedia, where we come up with terms. We haven't done this in a long time, but back when we had our weekly podcast, we had terms like a Paxton. What's a Paxton? A Paxton refers to any actor whose dominant characteristic is his or her inability to do anything which threatens to upstage a crap ton of Hollywood's best explosions and special effects. See Bill Pullman in Independence Day or Matthew Broderick in Godzilla.
That's really
We had one called the Terrence Stamp of Approval. The Terrence Stamp of Approval is that provided by certain actors who are routinely so talented, charismatic, and compelling that they automatically elevate any film they are in, at least for the duration of the time that they themselves are on screen. Of course, this movie is good around
All the way.
Stamp as well, but this certainly works here. And the term is obviously named for Terrence Stamp, but also includes other luminaries as Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, Joan Allen, Paul Giamatti, Diane Wiest, Michael Caine, and other noteworthy actors who aren't Tyler Perry. That was our quote on that. But I think, so when we didn't even talk about how great Terrence Stamp is, but I wanted to shout out to him too before it was over.
He is
And
awesome.
there's a different take of my favorite line of his. "Why do you say this to me? When you know I will kill you for it." He says that to Luther. And in here, they used a different cut for the Donner cut. He went, "Why do you say this to me? When you know I will kill," like it's more matter of fact.
Yeah.
But there's some sort of like godlike bravura in the way he says it in the original cut.
Yes,
"Why do you
yes.
say this to me?" Like it's a whole big thing. I loved it.
You touched on something just now that I do want to say, which is I feel like in the Donner cut, there were moments that were replaced
Yeah, that's one of them.
simply for the fact that it was like I'm doing my cut.
Yeah.
and it wasn't that it was a better take. It was and one of them that stood out to me was the moment when Clark Kent, Superman, goes back into the Fortress of Solitude. He's human. He's looking at the exploded area of the Fortress of Solitude, and he has that sort of speech to his dad, and he says, "Father!"
Yeah.
And I just remember in the original Lester cut, like that moment being so impactful and him seeming so like filled up with emotion, and in the Donner cut, it seemed like he was almost rushing the speech a little
It's
bit,
pushed,
and then he kind of
it comes off comedic, in my opinion.
yeah, it doesn't land as well, and I'm like, did you just change that because
Maybe that was rehearsal.
yeah,
Shoot on rehearsal, guys.
Yeah, I don't know, but anyway, that was one of the moments. But so yeah, to your point, yeah.
I win. I always win.
Yeah.
Who is this imbecile? I
Who is
love
this
Stamp.
imbecile?
Stamp's the best.
All right.
I also I do want to say I also don't like that we don't go back to Otis. We never see Otis
Poor
again.
guys. in
Otis
jail.
disappears and Miss Tessmacher disappears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miss Tessmacher disappears, and where? Where does she? Like when does? She,
That's a good question.
They're in the Fortress of Solitude. She goes to the bathroom in the Fortress of
oh my
Solitude.
God, we got to talk about that
and
moment.
that's the last time we hear.
We got to talk about that moment because it's literally a bit. It's literally a
Oh
bit.
no, it is very much the okay. For in the Donner cut, They arrive, Lex and Miss Tessmacher arrive at the Fortress of Solitude. And she
Great sentence.
Yeah, she's asking where the bathroom is, and he says, hold it. And she says, I have for 2 days. And although they never actually use the word bathroom, I don't think. I just think she says, where do you think it is? And he says, hold it. And she says, I've been holding it for 2 days. And then they go on and they talk, and then he discovers the control panel inside the Fortress of Solitude, and then he's out there by himself, and all of a sudden she's not there, and then you just hear a toilet being used in the background.
No, it's a flush.
Yes.
It's a baba. There's some sort of dialogue or something, and then you hear it's a beat, and then it's whoosh,
Yes.
right? And it's like this. You literally set up, punchlined it, and it's like, what's happening right now? We're literally doing bits. We're doing bits.
It goes back to Superman 1, which was, Mommy, I saw a man fly away. Don't lie. Slap. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very, very sad.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever.
All right, you've hinted at it a few times, but maybe it is time to wrap up this episode of Countdown to 9 Superman. You can find us on all the socials at Instagram at Countdown Movie Show. We are also at Blue Sky at Countdown Movie Show as well. Twitter's weird, so over there we're Countdown to 9. We have to kind of change that one for every show we're doing. We just did Countdown to 3. Now we're Countdown to 9. Catch us over there. Facebook also Countdown Movie Show, and you can find, of course, our big YouTube and Podbean pages as well. And Podbean puts us out everywhere. So if you got someone who's like, I don't understand how one works, trust me, we're on the next one. Amazon Music, we're on iHeartRadio, we're everywhere. So,
Well, guys, this was awesome.
Yep, I guess it's time to go.
Up, and away! On next week's episode, we review Super Chicken.